Hey guys, GHAZZY TV here with another Last Epoch build guide video, and in this one we're going to talk about the Acolyte Necromancer, the Abomination. A big shout out to Neuroscience, one of our Twitch viewers, who gave me a template for this build as I haven't played it in many years. So we took a look at this build and then we made quite a few changes to it. This build is just absolutely crazy. I absolutely love the way this build is played, as I'm a big fan of the one big minion slapping the shit out of everything. Now, many of you guys have checked out my BOBB the Slapper build. It is a Archmage Cryomage build, which is essentially going in with the idea of playing one big mage skeleton, which is doing frost damage with a bunch of extra projectiles. Now, in our case, this build is going to be doing a very similar playstyle, but we're going to be using the Abomination. So what the Abomination does is that once it's being summoned, it will consume every single minion you have on the field to create, well, an Abomination. And this is then a melee minion that's going to slap the bejesus out of everything it sees. Now, clearly, we can't call this build BOBB the Slapper. So what I decided to call this guy is BOBB, spelled with BOBB, so two B's at the end. Definitely not related. The One Punch Boy. That is so cringy, I know. Anyways, in the build I'm playing in game, I'm using a lethal concentration. However, it would be better to use a two-handed axe, being the obsidian axe. And then we have some generic low-life setup. I'm using some frostbite shackles. Don't really need to do that. And then the ribbons is a pretty nice detail you can add to avoid having your Abomination dying to big boss in-game abilities from well-telegraphed stuffs from high-end corruptions. Not really needed until you really start pushing, so it's kind of fine to skip this early on, especially if you need some resistances. But generically, the gear is pretty straightforward. Build a gear that I have in-game, not so much, a little bit behind. For example, I have a pretty terrible damaged souls outside of the extra levels of the Abomination, which is just a quality of life edition. My helmet is kind of trash because the sheer necrotic damage doesn't scale my build, since we're not dealing any necrotic damage whatsoever. So my gear is kind of half-assed, but despite this, we've been farming around 330, 350 corruption. Here in this Blood, Frost, and Death, we've been doing 330 corruption. So what's really cool when it comes to this specific build is the way it plays. You essentially have to keep in mind that you're playing with one minion, which means that you'll have to make sure that you have your minion dealing with the threats in front of you. This is a minion build, not an actual tank. The tank is the actual minion, all right? Just make sure those two are separated and you understand that. Once you understand that, you are going to be very careful with tanking things. Make sure you convocate with the traversal skill of your transplant. Make sure you stay away from enemies. Keep your minion tight to your chest so that the enemies are always going to have him between them and you. It's very, very important to do this. Another thing to keep in mind is that the way this is played is that we're using Infernal Shade and a Dread Shade, and the combination is pretty straightforward. Dread Shade is going to make him do 100% chance to crit and be just an absolute unit. And the Dread Shade is going to help us, the Infernal Shade is going to help us further the increase of damage output with speed modifiers. And the problem is that Infernal Shade just doesn't stop. He will die from that eventually. Now, this guy has an insane amount of HP, which is why he's just able to just run around and tank literally everything. So what we're going to do is that if you ever see him lose a little bit of HP, just reapply the Infernal Shade, and the damage ticks from the Infernal Shade will actually go away. Now, some of you guys might wonder, but GHAZZY, the Abomination is actually meant to decay. He's supposed to lose HP, and after a couple of minutes, you are reaching an unsustainable time frame of him decaying so fast that no matter how much you invest into the decay reduction, he will just fall over and die, and you have to do the insane resummoning process again. And yes, you are right. That is the case. However, I'm going to show you how this process looks in game. The Abomination we're actually speccing, this is thanks to Neuroscience in the chat earlier, so a big shout out to him for this. Age of the Undeath, or Age of Undeath. This is allowing the Abomination to only consume skeletons. Now, this means that we're going to be able to make him slightly less strong than what you can do with the Abomination. The trade-off for this is that he will no longer decay unless you have 6 or more skeletons actually active on the field. This allows us to, since we're not going to want to have any other minion on the field ever, make sure that he will always stay alive. And the way this is done is to basically put out all your skeletons, summon the Abomination, and then remove your skeletons from your actual action bar. And the reason for this is very simple. You don't ever want to misclick the Dread Shade on a non-Abomination minion, because it's going to be put on a 18-second cooldown where your minion is not going to have a 100% chance to crit, doing absurd crits across the field. So let me show you the summoning process in game. We're going to start with the skeletons, of which I should have a 6, 9, and then another skill on the bar being the Skelly Mages. 3, 4, 5, I think it is. Maybe 6? I think it's 5 actually. 5 it is. Without removing them from my bar, I'm going to wait for my mana, and then I'm going to assemble an Abomination, which will then consume all of them, and I'm going to target the melee skeletons first, very important, and just hold down the button till the Abomination is summoned. That's when all those skeletons have been consumed. As you might have noticed, I have quite a few different versions of this. I'll hold down the button, all the skeletons are getting consumed, and here we go. And now he's going to be summoned. There we go. I let go of the button. As you can see, I'm getting some skeletons back. More of that in a moment. Then we take away these actions from our bar. And like this. Now we don't have any other minions. The reason for this is when we click Dread Shade, it's always going to land on him. That's the important part. 18-second cooldown. Very important. This is because the Dread Shade is getting 100% to always crit, and stupid amounts of speeds and damage outputs. The Infernal Shade, however, is going to take damage from him, giving him haste, and also giving him a bunch of extra damage output and speed, and that's just going to be the case when it comes to these things. But the Infernal Shade will eventually take enough damage for him to die, but you can just reapply it, and I'll show you how that looks. So I'll place the first one on him. As you can see, we have 88, 94, 99, 104, 109, 114, 120. As you can see, it's ramping up quite extensively, and eventually he will fall over and die from this. So as this is ramping, we can then just reapply it, casting it again. As you can see, it's starting over 40, 50, 57, 60. So when this is starting to tick on a couple of hundred, you're going to notice that HP bar going down, but you can just reapply it all the time if you so wish to. Anyways, that's how the summoning process of this guy works and how we're going to play this. So that is why we're running skeletons. Skeleton specs are very simple. We're going to make sure we have a variety of different skeletons. So we make sure that the mages are cryomancers. We also make sure that they have extra HP, because this scales the actual consumption for the Abomination. Make sure we have pyromancers, and as many as possible. The reason that we have different types is because of the Epoch, Epic Reen. I have no idea how to pronounce this. Damage per type of minion consumed goes increased by 30%. This is a multiplicative more damage modifier, which is absolutely insane. The note before is for each minion consumed to create it up to a maximum of HP. As your damage is increased per minion up to a maximum of 20. The last one, Death in the Family, is if you absorb at least 5 different types of minions, assemble Abomination has increased cast and attack speed by 150%. Very important. Now, I decided to go for extra melee AoE as well as the meat grinder. You can skip these nodes and spec into the repugnant presence, which makes him take more threat, which alleviates a lot of pressure from you. You can also skip this and spec into the quick and the dead. Since he's not decaying, you'll just get a ton more damage, but you'll lose out on the area of effect, which I kind of preferred. And some people, like Neuroscience, which we took the template from, thanks again for that, we actually could go to Corrupt Palate and Frightful Feast, which would give him a 6-second cooldown, a big projectile spell damage approach, which I was not a big fan of, as I'd rather just focus on one type of damage output. Summon Skeletons themselves was pretty straightforward. We are again going for as many types of different minions as possible, and anything that scales their HP is what we're going for. So in this case, we're going to take the Necrotic Conviction, since that's going to scale the warrior's HP by 75%. Exoskeleton, exoskeleton, and exoskeleton. Left-hand side, we only take those to reach here. Same thing on the right-hand side. And we're going to pick up the 4 points in the when the skeleton die, there's a chance for to summon a random new one at the same location after 3 seconds, which is why I tend to focus the summon Abomination on the melee skeletons first, as sometimes I will spawn 1, 2, maybe 3 extra ones during the process of me summoning the actual Abomination, which allows us to further again get more minions to make him even bigger. Plus minus a couple doesn't really matter, but it is in the end an actually impactful sequence. Couple notes in here to braid shower over to get a rogue as well for another one. After this, yeah, the points you can spend literally everywhere you want. It doesn't matter. I shoved one extra in here. It's not going to change anything. And that's about it. It's very straightforward. Blessings and idols, we're going for one with Mark for Death. You can skip this. I think I just had it in my stash. Other than that, I would go for a low life approach. I would go for life and ward retention or life and life. If you're going for shackles like I have, you can actually go for life and a cold resistance on the stout idols. Other than that, I would just go double life on them. Very straightforward. And the blessings, I would go for void resistance, lightning rest, crit avoidance, cold resistance, and then minion damage on the last one. And that's basically the list of it. So as you can see, the in-game gear I have is a little bit scuffed, a little bit behind. Despite this, we're clearly having no problems clearing over 300 corruption with ease, honestly. Like, it's just been very, very comfortable to play this build. Big fan of the way this performs, especially versus bosses. A couple of shots on Arbus is down. A couple of shots on a Exiled Mage and they're down. Just absolutely beautiful. But if you're watching this video a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of days, who knows, after this was posted, there might be some changes to the guides that I make. To make sure that you're watching or reading the full updated guide, you'll make sure that you click on the link in the descriptions down below, which is leading you to the written guide for this build, which I will keep up to date at all times. So make sure you check that out. And in there, you'll find all the details and don't have to listen to me rambling on and on and on about this on YouTube. Now, if you made it this far and listening to my goddamn annoying voice, hit the goddamn like button, subscribe for more content, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe, keep rocking.